Before we start, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I knew exactly what I was doing when I dropped that fork on the dinner plate like it had personally offended me. The sound echoed through our kitchen, sharp, deliberate, calculated. Nash looked up from his meal, those tired pilot eyes still carrying traces of jet lag from his Frankfurt run. "I don't want you coming to the awards ceremony," I said, folding my napkin with the kind of surgical precision they taught us in administration training. Each crease was perfect, controlled, just like I needed this conversation to be. Nash blinked, not sure he'd heard me right. "Come again?" I looked up from the napkin, putting on that expression I'd perfected over years of hospital board meetings. Flat, polished, the kind of smile that kept people at exactly the distance I needed them. "The Medical Innovation Awards ceremony," I repeated. "I think it's best if you sit this one out." He stared at me across our kitchen table. The same table we'd picked out together from some second-hand shop when we were broke college kids who thought love could conquer anything. How naive we'd been. Now, watching his face process what I'd just said, I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not guilt. Clarity. Why? The question hung between us like smoke. I let out a breath, making sure it sounded exhausted, put upon, as if having to explain the obvious was just another burden I had to carry. "It's not about you personally, Nash. It's just the people there, the environment. It's not really your crowd. My crowd." I watched him repeat the words slowly, tasting them like something bitter. "Victoria, I fly 787s across 3 continents. I don't scrub toilets. You think I'm going to embarrass you?" The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was a man who navigated international airspace for a living, who carried the lives of hundreds of people in his hands every day. And I was treating him like he couldn't handle a room full of medical administrators sipping champagne. But that wasn't the point. The point was control. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I reached for my water, took a delicate sip, the kind that said I was being very patient with someone who just didn't understand the complexities of my world. Then I met his eyes and delivered the line I'd been rehearsing in my head for weeks. "I think you might not understand how important perception is in my world." There it was. The truth, wrapped in concern, delivered with just the right amount of condescension. Nash's jaw tightened. "You mean you don't want your colleagues knowing you married a pilot?" Each word was sharp, cutting. I flinched, not because it hurt, but because it was so close to the truth that it felt dangerous. "That's not fair," I said, but we both knew it was. "What's not fair is you suddenly being ashamed of me," he snapped. The chair scraped hard against the floor as he stood, and I felt a flicker of something. Not fear, anticipation. "I'm not ashamed." The lie came easily. I'd been practicing it for months. "Then what the hell is this?" He towered over me now, all righteous indignation and wounded pride. "You think I'm just going to sit here while you parade around like you're single?" I stood too, matching his energy, folding my arms. "I've worked hard to get where I am, Nash. You wouldn't understand the pressure I'm under." "Don't you dare!" His voice cut through whatever I was about to say next. "Don't you dare pretend I don't know what pressure feels like. You think flying international cargo routes is a walk in the park? You think working overtime so we can afford your designer blazers is fun for me?" Designer blazers. The comment stung because it was true. I did like expensive things. I liked the way they made me feel. Important, successful, worthy of respect. But Nash said it like it was something shameful, like wanting nice things was a character flaw. "This isn't about your job," I said, my voice tightening. "It's about how you carry yourself in rooms like that. You don't network. You don't schmooze. Because I'm not fake." Simple words, devastating accuracy. That's not what I'm saying, but it was exactly what I was saying, and we both knew it. "It's exactly what you're saying." His voice was low now, steady in a way that made my skin prickle. "You're embarrassed. That's the truth, isn't it?" A beat of silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I could have confirmed it, could have denied it, could have said a dozen different things. Instead, I let the silence speak for itself, because sometimes the cruelest thing you can do is simply refuse to lie. Nash leaned forward, hands on the table. "I'm going, Victoria, whether you want me there or not. I've stood in the shadows long enough." For a second, I was genuinely stunned. In all our years together, Nash had never pushed back like this. He'd always been accommodating, understanding, willing to bend for the sake of keeping peace. This version of him, stubborn, defiant, was unfamiliar territory. "Don't do this out of pride," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were wrong. This wasn't about pride. This was about something deeper, something I'd been slowly eroding for months without even realizing it. "No," he said, nodding once with a finality that made my stomach clench. "I'm doing it because I'm your husband. And if I'm not good enough to stand next to you, then maybe we've got bigger problems than an awards ceremony." The rest of dinner sat untouched. The air between us had gone frostbite cold, and I found myself studying his face in the silence. When had he become a stranger to me? When had I stopped seeing the man I'd fallen in love with and started seeing only an obstacle to my advancement? Sitting there in the wreckage of our conversation, I realized something that should have terrified me but didn't. I wasn't sorry, not yet, not even close. I was still convinced I was right, that he simply didn't understand the stakes. The game I was playing was bigger than his feelings, more important than his wounded pride. I had no idea that I'd just lit the fuse on the destruction of everything I thought I wanted. No idea that Nash's quiet determination would be the thing that brought my carefully constructed world crashing down around me. All I knew was that I had an awards ceremony to attend, a promotion to secure, and a husband who was finally going to learn his place. How beautifully, catastrophically wrong I was about everything. The Phoenix Medical Center ballroom smelled like money and ambition. Fresh orchids, cologne that cost more than most people's mortgage payments, and champagne chilled in silver buckets that reflected the chandelier light like liquid diamonds. I'd been planning for this night for months, every detail choreographed down to the shade of my emerald dress and the precise angle of my networking smile. Nash walked beside me through those gleaming glass doors, but we might as well have been strangers. I could feel his presence like dead weight, dragging at my carefully constructed image. The moment we crossed the threshold, I was already 3 steps ahead of him, my heels clicking with purpose against the marble floor. "Please don't hover," I whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, but quiet enough to maintain appearances. "I need to work the room." The words tasted like strategy, calculated and cold. Nash gave me that short nod, the one that said he was hurt but trying to hide it. Good. Maybe now he'd understand what this night meant to me. My dress had cost more than his monthly salary, and it showed. The emerald silk caught the light exactly the way I'd intended, making me look expensive and untouchable. I touched his arm, a quick, rehearsed gesture that looked affectionate to anyone watching, but felt like checking off a box on my to-do list. "You can sit at the side lounge," I added, gesturing toward the floor-to-ceiling windows where a few scattered couches offered refuge for the unimportant. "I'll come grab you for dinner." And just like that, I was free. Free to become the version of myself that belonged in this room, the version that had fought tooth and nail to earn a place among Phoenix's medical elite. I glided toward my target, a circle of white coats and pharmaceutical executives, their laughter floating through the air like expensive perfume. My face was already painted with my networking smile, the one I'd practiced in mirrors until it looked effortless. Dr. Preston Walsh was at the center of it all, tall and confident in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. Chief of cardiology, the man whose recommendation could make or break my promotion to chief administrator of strategic planning. "Victoria," he said, turning toward me with genuine warmth. "You look absolutely stunning tonight," I tossed. My hair back in that way that made me feel powerful, important, worthy of his attention. "Dr. Walsh, thank you. This venue is incredible. You've really outdone yourself with the planning," he laughed, leaning in slightly. "Please, call me Preston. We're off duty tonight." I touched his elbow lightly as I smiled, the same gesture I'd used on Nash, but this time it meant something. This time it was strategy paying dividends. From the corner of my eye, I could see Nash making his way to the lounge area I'd banished him to. A waiter offered him champagne, and he took it with the mechanical movements of a man going through the motions. Perfect. He was exactly where he belonged, on the sidelines, watching me shine. "I have to say," Preston continued, "your proposals for the strategic planning position have been impressive, really innovative thinking on the pharmaceutical partnerships." This was it. This was why I'd spent hours perfecting my appearance, why I'd relegated my husband to furniture, because conversations like this one were worth more than hurt feelings or wounded pride. "I appreciate that," I said, letting my voice carry just the right note of professional humility mixed with confidence. I think there's so much potential for growth if we approach it strategically. My phone buzzed, a text from Nash. Please don't come over, I need to make an impression. I typed back quickly, not looking up from my conversation. Please don't come over, I need to make an impression. The irony of his message wasn't lost on me. He understood exactly what this night was about, even if he didn't like it. For the next 20 minutes, I was exactly who I needed to be. Charming without being flirtatious, intelligent without being threatening, ambitious without being desperate. I worked that room like a virtuoso, collecting business cards and promises of future conversations. Preston stayed close, and I made sure everyone could see how comfortable we were together. The pharmaceutical executives were impressed by my knowledge of their industry. The board members nodded approvingly as I discussed cost-saving measures. I was winning, piece by piece, smile by smile. This was what victory felt like. Validation from people who mattered, respect from peers who could advance my career. Then I saw Nash approaching from across the room. My smile faltered for just a moment before I caught myself. He wasn't supposed to leave his designated area. He was supposed to understand that this was my time, my moment, my carefully orchestrated performance. Nash, I said through gritted teeth as he drew near, I asked you to stay over there. The words came out sharper than I'd intended, but I needed him to understand. This conversation with Preston couldn't be interrupted. Too much was at stake. I wasn't going to say anything, he replied quietly. Just wanted to be close. Close. As if proximity to me was some kind of comfort instead of a liability. As if his presence here was supportive rather than potentially damaging to everything I'd worked for. This is important, okay? I kept my voice firm, almost scolding, like speaking to a child who couldn't grasp adult concepts. I need you to trust me with this. Preston shifted uncomfortably beside me, and I felt a flash of panic. Nash's presence was already contaminating the carefully controlled atmosphere I'd created. You mean, trust you not to be seen with me? The question hung in the air like a live wire. Direct, accurate, completely inappropriate for this setting. Preston cleared his throat awkwardly and looked away, suddenly fascinated by something across the room. I forced a small laugh, the kind that said, "Work situations, am I right?" while dying inside. "Sorry, work talk," I said to Preston, my voice bright and dismissive. The damage control was automatic, instinctive. Nash stared at me for a moment longer, and I watched something shift behind his eyes, not anger, something colder, more final. "Right," he said quietly. "Work." Then he turned and walked away, not back to the lounge, but toward the windows, where he stood with his hands in his pockets looking out at the Phoenix skyline. I should have felt relief, should have been satisfied that I'd maintained control of the situation. Instead, I felt something hollow opening up in my chest. Preston was already turning back to me with a polite smile, ready to continue our conversation as if nothing had happened. But something had happened, something I was too intoxicated by success to recognize. Nash hadn't just walked away from our conversation. He'd walked away from me, from us, from whatever we'd been. Before I decided my career was more important than his dignity, I spent the rest of the evening being exactly who I thought I needed to be, never once looking back to check on the man I'd married. After all, I was winning, wasn't I? I didn't notice Nash leave. That's the detail that haunts me now, the one that cuts deepest when I replay that night in my mind. I was so intoxicated by my own performance, so drunk on Preston's attention and the pharmaceutical executive's approving nods, that I completely missed the moment my husband walked out of my life. It wasn't until dinner was announced that I bothered to look for him. I excused myself from the circle of medical elite I'd been cultivating all evening, my heels clicking confidently across the marble floor toward the lounge area, where I'd banished him. The couches were empty except for a few scattered programs and abandoned champagne flutes. "Excuse me," I asked a passing waiter, maintaining my polished smile. "Did you see the gentleman who was sitting here earlier? Tall, dark hair, pilot's bearing?" The waiter paused, clearly trying to place who I meant. "Oh, the man in the navy jacket? He left about an hour ago, ma'am." An hour ago. While I'd been discussing pharmaceutical partnerships and cost efficiency measures, Nash had simply left. No dramatic exit, no scene, no final confrontation. He'd just removed himself from my equation as quietly as I'd tried to remove him from my evening. I felt a flicker of something. Not quite panic, not quite guilt. More like irritation at an unexpected variable in my carefully planned night. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. Nash was supposed to wait patiently until I was ready to acknowledge him again. He was supposed to understand that this was bigger than his feelings. I pulled out my phone and called him. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. By the third attempt, that flicker had become something sharper, more insistent. I fired off a quick text. "Where are you?" Then another. "Please answer me." But I couldn't let this derail my evening, not when I was so close to securing everything I'd worked for. I slipped my phone back into my clutch and returned to the dinner table, sliding into my assigned seat next to Preston with practiced grace. If anyone noticed my brief absence, they were too polite to mention it. "Everything all right?" Preston asked quietly as I unfolded my napkin. "Fine," I replied, my voice steady and controlled. "Just checking on something." The lie came easily. I'd gotten good at lies over the past few months. Small ones, convenient ones, the kind that smoothed over inconvenient truths. Throughout the 7-course meal, I was brilliant, charming, exactly the kind of woman who belonged at the head table of Phoenix's most prestigious medical event. I laughed at Preston's jokes, offered insightful commentary on the hospital's future direction, and even managed to work in a few subtle references to my strategic planning proposals. But underneath it all, my phone sat silent in my clutch. No return calls, no apologetic texts, nothing from Nash to indicate that he understood the gravity of what he'd done by leaving early. Didn't he realize how this might look? What people might think about a woman whose husband couldn't even stay for dinner? I excused myself between courses and tried calling again from the ladies' room. Nothing. The silence felt wrong, unnatural. Nash had never been the type to sulk or play games. When he was angry, he said so. When he was hurt, it showed on his face. This complete radio silence was new. Standing in that opulent bathroom, surrounded by marble and gold fixtures, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked perfect. Every hair in place, makeup flawless, dress worth more than most people's monthly rent. I looked like exactly the kind of woman who belonged in this world, who deserved respect and recognition and all the things I'd been fighting for. So, why did I suddenly feel so empty? I rejoined the dinner and threw myself back into the performance. When they announced the Innovation Awards, I applauded enthusiastically. When Preston leaned over to whisper something about the board's decision timeline, I smiled and nodded, as if I hadn't been mentally calculating how many missed calls I'd racked up. The evening wound down with the usual pleasantries and business card exchanges. Preston walked me to the valet stand, ever the gentleman. "This has been wonderful, Victoria," he said, his hand briefly touching my arm. "I think you're going to fit perfectly into the strategic planning role. Victory." This was what victory was supposed to feel like. Validation, recognition, the promise of everything I'd wanted. So why did it taste like ashes in my mouth? The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life, not because of traffic or distance, but because of the silence. My phone, which had been buzzing constantly all evening, with congratulations from colleagues and follow-up messages from networking contacts, remained stubbornly quiet when it came to the one call that mattered. I pulled into our driveway at nearly midnight. The house was dark, except for the porch light. Nash always left it on when one of us was out late. A small courtesy that I'd never really appreciated until that moment, when it felt like the only welcoming thing in my world. Inside, the house felt different. Too quiet. I called his name as I kicked off my heels, but got no response. His keys weren't on the kitchen counter where he usually left them. His jacket wasn't hanging on the back of the chair. It was as if he'd never come home at all. I found him finally in our bedroom, lying on top of the covers, still fully dressed except for his shoes. He wasn't asleep, I could tell by the way he was breathing, but he didn't acknowledge my presence when I entered the room. "Nash," I said softly, suddenly unsure of myself for the first time all evening. Nothing. Not even a grunt of acknowledgement. I changed out of my designer dress and into pajamas, moving quietly through my routine, as if trying not to disturb a sleeping stranger. When I finally climbed into bed beside him, he didn't move toward me the way he usually did, didn't ask about my evening, or offer to rub my feet like he had after every work event for the past 5 years. He just lay there, perfectly still, perfectly silent, perfectly unreachable. That's when I realized that my perfectly orchestrated evening had cost me something I hadn't meant to spend. Something that, once lost, might be impossible to get back. The morning after came with all the subtlety of a surgical procedure, precise, clinical, devastating in its efficiency. I woke to the sound of Nash's alarm at 5:30 a.m., a sound that had punctuated our mornings for years. But instead of the usual routine of coffee and sleepy conversation, I heard only the mechanical sounds of a man going through motions: shower running, closet doors opening and closing, the click of his flight bag zippers. By the time I made it downstairs, he was already gone. No note, no coffee left warming for me, no kiss. Goodbye? Just the lingering scent of his cologne and the absence of everything that had made our mornings feel like ours. This became our new normal over the next 3 weeks, though it took me embarrassingly long to recognize it as such. Nash operated with the efficiency of a man who had streamlined his life to exclude unnecessary complications. He left early, returned late, and when our paths did cross, he treated me with the kind of polite professionalism he might show a colleague he didn't particularly like but had to work with. The promotion came through on a Thursday. Chief Administrator of Strategic Planning, Phoenix Medical Center. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed for, handed to me in a phone call that lasted less than 5 minutes. I should have been elated. Instead, I found myself sitting in an empty house holding a bottle of champagne I'd bought weeks ago to celebrate with Nash. When I called to tell him the news, he answered on the 4th ring, with a tone that suggested he was busy with more important things. "Congratulations," he said when I finished explaining about the position, the salary increase, the corner office with the view of the mountains. "That's what you wanted." Past tense. That's what you wanted, not what we wanted or what you've worked for. As if my success was something that had already happened to someone else, something that no longer had anything to do with him. It was around this time that I started noticing changes in Nash that went beyond emotional withdrawal. His clothes looked more expensive. His phone rang with calls from people I didn't recognize, names like Sophie Martinez and Nicole Stevens, who spoke to him with a familiarity that made something cold settle in my stomach. "Dubai," I heard him say into his phone one evening as I passed our home office. "Yeah, I can extend it to 2 weeks if you need the coverage." Dubai. When had Nash started flying international cargo routes? When had his job become something that required extended overseas trips? I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before. His flight bag looked newer, more professional. His uniform shirts were pressed to perfection. He carried himself differently, straighter, more confident, like a man who had somewhere important to be, and people who respected him when he got there. The realization hit me slowly, then all at once. Nash was thriving without me. I tried calling him more frequently, but his responses became increasingly brief. One-word texts, voice messages that lasted 30 seconds and conveyed nothing but basic information. He was busy, he was traveling, he was fine. Always fine. Never hurt, never angry, never anything that would give me something to work with. The worst part was how good he looked. When I caught glimpses of him in the mornings before he left for the airport, or in the evenings when he returned from trips that I knew nothing about, he looked better. Rested despite the travel, confident despite our failing marriage, happy despite my absence from his life. I, meanwhile, was discovering that getting everything you thought you wanted felt remarkably like losing everything that actually mattered. My new office was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows, mahogany desk, enough space for a conference table that seated 12. I sat in my expensive chair wearing my expensive clothes, making decisions that affected hundreds of employees and millions of dollars in hospital revenue, and felt absolutely nothing. The pharmaceutical partnerships I'd cultivated were paying dividends. The cost-saving measures I'd proposed were being implemented across departments. Preston stopped by regularly to discuss strategy, his attention warm and professional and completely hollow compared to the easy intimacy I'd once shared with Nash over takeout dinners and Saturday morning coffee. 4 months into my new position, I overheard something that stopped me cold. I was leaving a board meeting when I caught Preston talking to another department head in the hallway. "Speaking of strategic planning," the other man was saying, "did you know Victoria's husband is a captain now? International cargo operations for the aviation company. Heard he's being considered for some kind of industry recognition." Captain? Nash was a captain. When had that happened? How had I missed something so significant in the life of the man I shared a bed with? Really? Preston's voice carried genuine interest. I had no idea Victoria was married to anyone in aviation. She's never mentioned it. She's never mentioned it. The words hit me like physical blows. I'd been so successful at compartmentalizing Nash out of my professional life that my colleagues didn't even know he existed. I'd gotten exactly what I'd wanted that night at the awards ceremony, a career where my husband was invisible. So why did victory taste like poison in my mouth? I started watching Nash more carefully after that, studying him like a medical case I needed to solve. The way he moved through our house with purpose but no attachment. The way he answered his phone with a warmth reserved for everyone except me. The way he seemed to have built an entire life that functioned perfectly without my participation. He wasn't angry anymore. That might have been easier to handle. Instead, he was indifferent, which felt like being erased one day at a time. I'd wanted a husband who wouldn't embarrass me in professional settings. What I'd gotten was a husband who'd removed himself from my settings entirely, leaving me to succeed alone in exactly the way I'd thought I wanted. The irony was so perfect it would have been funny if it hadn't been destroying me from the inside out. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning addressed to Captain Nash Brennan and guest. Captain of the Year, Phoenix Aviation Excellence Awards. The cardstock was expensive, embossed with gold lettering that caught the light when I held it up. I stared at it for a long time, trying to process the fact that my husband had achieved something significant enough to warrant formal recognition. And I'd had no idea it was coming. Nash was in the kitchen when I found him, black coffee in hand, scrolling through what looked like flight schedules on his tablet. He glanced up when I entered, his expression neutral and professional. The look he gave me now instead of the warm smile that used to light up his face when I walked into a room. "You're being honored," I said, holding up the invitation like evidence of something I couldn't quite name. He nodded, taking another sip of coffee. "Yeah. Pilot Association dinner next weekend." His voice was matter-of-fact, as if being named Captain of the Year was just another item on his to-do list. That's a big deal, Nash." The words felt clumsy in my mouth. When had I become someone who had to reach for ways to acknowledge my husband's accomplishments? "Suppose so," he replied, not looking up from his tablet. The silence stretched between us, filled with all the questions I didn't know how to ask. How long had he been up for this award? Who had nominated him? How many people in his professional world knew about this recognition that I was only just learning about? "Do you want me to come?" The question slipped out before I'd fully formed it, carrying more desperation than I'd intended. Nash finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. "It says I can bring someone. Not yes, not no. Just a statement of fact that left me hanging in the space between invitation and rejection. "So, is that a yes?" I pressed, hating how small my voice sounded. "If you want." That was all he gave me. No smile, no, "I'd like that." No acknowledgement that having his wife there might mean something to him. Just neutral permission delivered in the same tone he might use to discuss weather patterns or flight delays. I nodded, trying to interpret this non-invitation as something positive. "Okay," I said quietly. "I'd like to be there." Saturday arrived with the weight of a final exam I hadn't studied for. I spent 2 hours getting ready, cycling through outfits and makeup choices with the kind of desperate attention to detail usually reserved for job interviews or first dates. When I finally settled on a silver dress that struck the right balance between supportive wife and sophisticated professional, I felt like I was costuming myself for a role I'd forgotten how to play. Nash was ready in 10 minutes. Black jacket, simple tie, clean shave. He waited by the door while I finished, checking his watch with the patience of a man killing time before a business obligation. When I appeared at the top of the stairs, he looked up and said, "You look nice," in the same tone he might use to compliment a colleague's presentation. The ride to the venue was 20 minutes of carefully maintained silence. I found myself studying his profile, searching for traces of the man who used to crack jokes to calm my pre-event nerves, who used to reach over and squeeze my hand when he sensed I was nervous. This version of Nash seemed perfectly self-contained, needing nothing from me except my physical presence. The hotel ballroom was elegant in a way that felt both familiar and foreign. These were Nash's people now, pilots and operations managers and aviation executives who moved through the room with the kind of confident competence I recognized from my own professional circles. The difference was that here, Nash belonged. I watched him transform the moment we entered that space. His shoulders straightened, his smile became genuine, and when a striking woman with dark hair approached us, he lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. "Nash," she said warmly, "we've been waiting to toast you." Sophie Martinez, I learned, when Nash introduced her as EOF, his operations coordinator. She was followed by Nicole Stevens, Director of International Routes, and Brooke Williams, Safety Operations Manager. All women, all clearly comfortable with Nash in a way that made me feel like an intruder at my own husband's celebration. And Nash. Nash didn't introduce me, not immediately, not naturally, not the way a proud husband introduces his accomplished wife. I stood there, clutching my purse, waiting for acknowledgement that never came. When conversation flowed around me without including me, I excused myself to find the ladies' room, needing a moment to process what felt like social suffocation. When I returned, Nash was deep in conversation with his colleagues, sharing stories about cargo runs and safety protocols with the kind of enthusiasm he used to reserve for describing his days to me. I slipped back into the group and tried to find an opening, a way to contribute to conversations about people and places I knew nothing about. "We didn't realize you'd be bringing anyone," Brooke said when I attempted to join a discussion about international route safety. Nash never really talks much about his personal life. The words weren't cruel, just observational, but they hit like precision strikes. Nash never talks about his personal life, which meant Nash never talked about me. Just as I'd successfully compartmentalized him out of my professional world, he'd apparently returned the favor. During dinner, I sat beside him like a stranger, watching him receive recognition from people who clearly respected and admired him. When they called him to the stage, I clapped with the enthusiasm of a polite audience member, not the pride of a devoted wife. And when colleagues stopped by our table to congratulate him, their eyes slid past me like I was decorative furniture. By the time coffee was served, I understood with crystalline clarity what I'd accomplished. I'd wanted a husband who wouldn't embarrass me in professional settings, so I'd trained him to remove himself from my professional life entirely. Now I was discovering that success was a two-way street, and Nash had learned my lesson better than I'd ever intended to teach it. "I'm going to head out," I said finally, placing my napkin down with hands that trembled slightly. Nash raised an eyebrow. "Everything all right?" "I'm just not feeling well." The lie came automatically, but it wasn't entirely untrue. I felt sick with the recognition of what I'd lost and what I'd become. "Drive safe," he said, as casually as if I were leaving a business meeting. No offer to come with me, no concern for what might be wrong. Just polite dismissal. I walked out of that ballroom alone, leaving Nash surrounded by people who valued him exactly as he was, and finally understood the difference between winning and succeeding. I'd gotten everything I thought I wanted and lost everything that actually mattered. The coldest part was realizing that this outcome wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. It was exactly what I'd designed.